Determining the species of fish you see on your fish finder can be the difference between catching 15 pounds of bass or nothing. Today, I'll put this skill to the test on Grand Lake in the dog days of summer. Can I catch 5 bass for 15 pounds? Let's find out. I started my day on the lower end of Grand Lake. I wanted to graph some main lake points to see if I could find some schools of fish that were still set up in their summer locations. After graphing over several points, I started noticing some fish that were suspended 5 to 10 feet off the bottom over these points and also over the creek channel. You can see these dots here. One thing to call out is that these dots are spread pretty far apart and they're spread all the way across the screen. Normally, when I'm looking at bass, I find that the bass are going to be more tightly grouped together, though not right on top of each other. To verify that these may not be bass, I switched over to the 2D sonar view on my Humminbird. Once I made this change, I could notice some very large arches on my 2D sonar. The settings I have on my fish finder will not produce this large of an arch unless I'm looking at an 8 or 9 pound bass. Now obviously these could be very big bass, but given how far apart the dots were spaced on down imaging and how large the arches were on 2D sonar, I assumed that these were gar. My assumption was quickly proven right after 2 gar surfaced right next to the boat. These are not bass, so it's time to move on. Because I didn't see any bass on the lower end of the lake on these main lake points, I decided to run 2 to 3 miles up the lake and look at some different main lake points in a different section of the lake. I immediately started to see some fish sitting close to the bottom on these main lake points. In this image, you can see a ton of dots sitting very close to the bottom on the top of this point. Unlike the last image where the dots are spread very far apart, these dots are spaced too close together to be bass. In this situation, you can barely differentiate one dot from another because they're so tightly packed together. In general, bass like to be schooled together in a relatively tight grouping, but they don't like to be on top of each other. Usually, they prefer to be maybe a foot to 3 feet apart. This means you should be able to see some black space between each of the dots on the down imaging view. If we take a look at 2D sonar, you can also see that you can barely differentiate one arch from another on all of these points because the fish are just stacked so tight together. Whenever I see fish that are positioned tight to the bottom and they're very close together, 95% of the time, these are going to be catfish. To verify this, I picked up a bait and threw it down there, and on my first cast, I could actually feel my bait going over the top of fish, and when I brought my line in, you could see the slime of the catfish all over the line. Again, these are not bass, so it's time to move on. After striking out again on these main lake points, I decided to move further back into the creeks in this section of the lake. I didn't find anything interesting, so I decided to move 2 to 3 miles up the lake again to see if another section of the lake would be more productive. I graphed some of the main lake points, then made my way back into some of the secondary points back in this creek. On the 3rd or 4th point I graphed, I started to see several fish that were positioned out in front of a drop-off and also close to a brush pile. We finally found what we're looking for. I immediately identified this school of fish as bass for 3 reasons. The first is that the dots are grouped tightly together, but they still have some black space between those dots. Again, bass don't like to be stacked right on top of each other. They like to have kind of their own personal space or personal bubble. This means that the dots will be grouped somewhat tight together, but they're still going to have black space between every single dot. The second indicator that this is bass is that this grouping of dots is spread more horizontally than vertically. If the dots are spread more across the screen than straight up and down, 95% of the time you're dealing with bass. On the flip side, you may find a grouping of fish that looks similar to this, but is spread more vertically than horizontally. In this situation, you're dealing with crappie. Crappie like to stack on top of each other, 7, 8, or 9 dots tall. However, bass usually don't stack on top of each other more than 3 or 4 dots tall, except for when you're dealing with massive schools of bass that are 200 or 300 fish big. These are very uncommon, and most of the time I find that my bass schools are stacked no more than 3 to 4 dots tall, and they're spread across the screen maybe 7 to 10 dots wide. The third way I'm able to identify this school of fish as bass is by changing over to the 2D sonar view. If If we take a look at these arches, which are the same as the dots we looked at earlier, these arches are not very long, but they do have quite a bit of mass in the middle of them. You can determine this by looking at the number of colors that actually show up in each of those arches. If you can see 3 or 4 colors going from maybe yellow to red, that's usually going to be a heavier fish or a fish that has more mass to it. Bass usually have a lot of mass in their stomach, but they're not that long. A gar, on the other hand, is going to be very long and not have a lot of mass in the stomach. Also, if you don't see any of that red coloring in your arches, usually you're dealing with a smaller fish that might just be a 1-pound bass or a crappie or perch or something like that. One important call out is that the image on your screen is going to vary greatly depending on the settings you're using. The dots on down imaging and the arches on 2D sonar are only going to look the way they do in this video if you're using my exact settings. And over the years, I've been asked hundreds if not thousands of times which settings to use on specific fish finders. Finally, I decided to make some sonar settings guides that I'm selling on my website, fishthemoment.com. If you head to the website, then go to the new Sonar Guides page, you'll find detailed sonar settings guides that walk through every single setting in great detail. I tried to make them as simple as possible so even those who struggle with technology can still follow the guide and set up the settings no problem. They're very detailed and took a ton of time to make, therefore I only have 3 available right now. However, there are a lot more guides coming to the website over the next couple of months, including current units and some older units that may have been released 3 to even 10 years ago. Definitely stay on the lookout for new sonar guides and check out Fish the Moment's content for updates on when new units are available. Check them out at fishthemoment.com. Now, even though I've identified this grouping of dots as bass, it doesn't mean that I'm actually going to fish for these dots. Instead, I'm actually going to move further up on top of this point and look at this brush pile here. Just to the right side of the brush pile, you can see a very nice dot just to the right of it. If you look at 2D sonar, you can see that the arch is pretty short, but it has good mass to it. It has some red in there. This is definitely a bass, and the reason I can guess that this is going to be a bass is because there's a school of bass just out in front of the point. What is probably happening is that these bass are moving up out of the deeper water into that brush pile to feed or to sit when it gets really sunny and then move back out. Let's see if I can get that bass to bite by throwing a jig down there. Got him, big one. Out of a brush pile. Stay on there, fish. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Stay on there, stay pegged. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Number 1 right there. Couldn't find any fish grouped up, guys. They were all just scattered out offshore. So I decided to start looking a little bit shallower for some brush piles. And I found an isolated fish in that brush pile. You could see him on the graph. And man, he just choked that Fish at the Moment offshore jig. Whenever they're in brush piles, guys, that Fish at the Moment offshore jig, that football jig, is the number 1 bait to catch him. And oh man, he's pegged in there. I need the pliers. Oh man, that is so awesome. There we go, first fish of the day, 3 pounds, 4 ounces. 3 1/4 pounder. We just need 4 more of these and we have finished the challenge. That is a great start, and we should be able to get a few more fish out of this brush pile hopefully, and then maybe find a few more and put our 15 pounds in the boat. Beautiful fish right there. Let's get this guy back down there. And she's off. Let's get another one. After catching my first keeper, I decided to look for more brush piles in the same area. Unfortunately, it's not always that easy to find areas that have bass and brush piles in them at the same time. I did find several brush piles, and I did find areas that had a few bass spread out across a point or a drop, but no areas that had both at the exact same time. While I was looking for this brush pile and bass combination, I stumbled upon another point that didn't have any fish showing up on down imaging, but it did have some fish that were showing up on the side imaging view of my fish finder. If you take a look at the right side of the side imaging image, you can see that the bottom third of the screen has a very smooth bottom. You can tell it's a smooth bottom if we compare it to a rocky bottom, where you'll have a lot of shadows and it looks almost rough on the screen. If we go back to the other image, you can see that the bottom has 1 consistent coloring to it, which indicates it's going to be a smooth bottom. Just above that smooth bottom section, you can see several little black dots. They're not uniformly spread out like you would think a rock formation would create. Instead, they're just kind of scattered across this brighter bottom in almost random positions. Whenever you have a smooth bottom area, and then you start seeing these small black grains of rice or black dots on the screen that are not really tightly grouped together, they're just kind of spread out somewhat randomly across the screen, usually these are fish. Now if we look a little bit further up the screen, you can see that the bottom does get a little bit rockier. And if those fish were setting up in the rocks, it would be almost impossible to tell if you're looking at fish or if you're looking at rocks. This only really works when you have a smooth bottom area and then you have those dots spread out on that smooth bottom. Even though I was able to determine that there were fish set up on this point, I wasn't 100% confident that they were bass. However, I had caught bass on a point that was within 200 yards of the spot that I was currently graphing. Because I'd caught bass in the same area, I made the educated guess that these may be bass as well. Therefore, to test my theory, I turned the boat around and made a few casts to see if I could get bit.
Got him. Good one. Stay on there, fish. On a crankbait. Oh, stay on there, fish. Keep him down. It's a good one. Oh, there we go. Found another school of fish here. Chasing some bait fish. Make sure I'm spot locked. There we go. They're all over this point. I found those fish in the brush pile and I only got one to bite, and really it's hard to find brush piles, enough of them at least in 8 hours to catch 5 fish. So I've been looking for a school of fish while also looking for brush piles. And I finally found one, got that one to bite, a Strike King 6XD, deep diving crankbait. Beautiful fish right there. That's number 2, and that's another solid 2 3/4 pounder. Let's get him on the scales. 2 pounds, 11 ounces, just an ounce short of 2 3/4 pounds. So at least I know I can judge him pretty well with the eyes, which is good. That puts our total weight now to 5 pounds, 14 ounces. So almost a 3-pound average. That's really solid. We just need basically 3 more fish like this and we complete the challenge. There we go, beautiful fish. Let's get him back down there. Our 3-pounder. Get back down there, fish. Oh, I got another jump for us. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, gotta get 3 more fish hopefully on this crankbait. We might be able to finish the challenge right here. Got him. Good one. Stay pinned, fish. Oh God, I lost another one this size. The cast before this, guys. Changed up colors to sexy shad from Sarcher's blue back. Looks like they ate this a little bit better. The last 2 barely had it. I'm glad that losing that last fish didn't shut down the school. That happens a lot of times. When you lose one, they'll stop biting, but I gave him a second to rest while I changed crankbait colors and it seemed to work. This thing's got it. There we go, guys. 2 pounds, 14 ounces, almost a full 3-pounder right there. Get that weight locked in. This is going really well, guys. We just need a couple 3.5s instead of these 2 3/4, and we're gonna be in business. But I need to get back down there though, because when those fish are hot, you gotta keep after them. Just cranking this on a 7'6" Denali Covert series. It's a Covert Light 7.6 medium heavy action rod, 5/4 ring gear ratio reel, 12-pound monofilament line, Strike King 6XD, and they're up on top of this point like crazy, guys. I could see them all over the graph. You can actually see them up on 360 imaging even. There's a ton of them up there. I just need to keep them pegged and keep after them. Got him. Good one. They're just up on top of this point chasing shad. There's not really any brush or anything up there. It's actually, I'm getting hung up in some brush piles close to the boat, but they're not in the brush. They're just up on top of this point. You can see them on the side imaging. I'm not even really seeing them on live scope. I can just see them on 360, and then when I side image this point, you could see them, but this is a good one. Oh, I got two fish, look at this. 2 on at once. How do I handle this? I don't really know what to do here. Guess pin them like this. Grab one, grab the other. That's one way to finish a Catch 15 challenge, baby. Right there. 2 fish, 1 cast, 15 pounds in the boat. That's how we do it. Fish the moment, baby. Woo! Woo! Oh man, guys, that is crazy. I put the bigger one in the live well just because I didn't want to lay it on the carpet. I don't normally have to weigh 2 fish at once, so one's in the live well, and we'll take them out here in a second and weigh them. But let's get this first guy weighed. That is unbelievable. 2 fish in 1 cast at the end of August. This spot, guys, I've been getting cut off by pontoon boats and jet skiers. They've been running over this point, running all around me. It's a busy day on the lake. There's so many other fishermen around, like every other point, all around there's fishermen. Now I'm on this spot all to myself, just hammering them on like one of the busiest days I've ever seen out here on Grand Lake. And there's fishermen all over the place, but we are just doubling up, having a blast over here. Right there, 2 pounds, 15 ounces, another kind of cookie cutter, 2 3/4 pounder. Get that guy back down. Actually, we'll throw him in the live well real quick so you can see both these fish. Throw this guy in the live well. Oh, there we go. And that one's a lot better there. That one's gonna be definitely over 3 pounds. Get the weight of this guy. He'll balance out all those 2 3/4 pounders. I'm hoping. I think it'll get me to the 15 pound mark. There we go, 4 pounds, 2 ounces, 4 pounder. Lock that weight in there. If we lock that in, we're currently sitting at 15 pounds, 13 ounces. Same exact weight as the last challenge. That is awesome, guys. You can see it's kind of hard to see down there, but 15 pounds, 13 ounces on the scale. Got a 3.4, a 2.11, a 2.14, a 2.15, and a 4.02. Let's get our guy at the live well real quick and let him get back into the lake. Oh, there we go, guys. That is the way to end a Catch 15 challenge in style. Doubled up on the last cast to go over 15 pounds. You can't beat that. Let's get these fish back down in the lake. Get the little guy back in there first. Then we'll get the big guy. There we go. They're both back after it. Back down to that school. I'm gonna have to keep casting, guys. After you catch 2 on 1 cast, maybe I should just end the day. I'm not really sure what the protocol is in this situation. I think I have to keep casting though, because I mean, they are up on this point. I'm seeing them bust shad. It's crazy for being the middle or the end of August, basically. We have like 2 more days until September, and the fish are just going crazy on this spot right here. It's almost like a summer school in June, and they're up there catching my crankbait. Again, that crankbait right there, let me shut this live well off for you guys so you can actually hear me. Crankbait I caught those fish on was a Strike King 6XD. I changed from a chartreuse powder blueback color to a sexy shad color. And for whatever reason, I had that first fish barely hooked on the chartreuse black, or the chartreuse blueback. Sorry, I can't even talk, I'm so excited. And then I switched over to the sexy shad after losing one. And right after that, got 1 fish hooked really well and then doubled up. So a lot of times, just a slight color change, especially on these brighter sunny days, can make a really big difference when you're deep cranking. That is absolutely awesome though. Let's do a quick recap of the day. And before we do that, let me see if I can catch another fish, and I'll see you guys here in a second. 15 pounds, 13 ounces. We completed the challenge, and that's actually the exact same weight I had on Beaver Lake in another Catch 15 video. If you enjoyed this video and want to see all of my challenges that I've done in the past, I'll leave a link to all of them in the description below. Today, I caught most of my fish on a Strike King 6XD crankbait in that sexy shad pattern. This crankbait dives anywhere from 15 to 18 feet of water, but I wasn't actually fishing all that deep. This point behind me here is only in maybe 10 to 12 foot of water, but there was a big school of fish up there, and I really wanted to grind that bait and deflect it off the bottom to get as many of those fish to react as possible, and it definitely worked. I changed colors from a chartreuse powder blueback to the sexy shad color, and it helped keep those fish pinned a little bit easier. And whenever you find a really big school of fish like I showed in the graph there, a crankbait is my #1 go-to option. Honestly, I don't find that many schools set up like this at the end of August, so this was a kind of a treat, a rare occasion where I could actually catch them really well on a crankbait, and I had a blast doing it. The rod I was throwing with this bait is a Denali Covert Light crankbait rod, a 7'6" medium heavy action crankbait rod. It has a really bendy tip. It basically bends in half, which is great for these deep diving crankbaits with the treble hooks on them. I was throwing that on an Abu Garcia Black Max winch reel. I got it at Walmart for 50 bucks. It's a 541 Euro Shear reel, and that's what I always throw on my deep diving crankbaits. For the line, I'm just throwing 12-pound monofilament line. I like the monofilament because it has a little bit extra stretch. And that first fish that I had hooked barely had it, and I felt like I was able to get him in the boat because of that really flexible rod with the parabolic bend, and also that monofilament line that had a little bit extra stretch. It also helped then that I changed the crankbait color to get those fish to eat it better, and with that whole setup, I was able to put a bunch of good fish in the boat. I did catch one other fish too before I actually found this school out of an offshore brush pile on my trusty Fish the Moment offshore jig. This is a 5/8 ounce football jig, and whenever the fish are set up in offshore brush or offshore rock, just in any sort of thick cover, this offshore jig definitely gets the job done. It was a solid 3-pounder I got on this bait in the PB&J color with a jewel bait Versa Craw Jr. If you haven't checked out this trailer before, guys, you can actually check it out on jewelbait.com. It's kind of a cross between a finesse craw and like a twin tail grubs. You get the best of both worlds. You can either take off some of the tails to make it just a twin tail craw, or make it more of a finesse craw by removing the outside legs. It's a really versatile bait, and it works great in the back of this football jig. I'll link all these baits down in the description below, guys, and if you want to check them out, you can either find them at jewelbait.com, or you can use my Tackle Warehouse links to help support the channel. With this football jig, I was just throwing it on a 7'6" heavy action Quantum Smoke S3 rod with 15-pound Sunline FC Sniper fluorocarbon, and I was throwing it on a 7.3-to-1, 7.4-to-1 Cast King Mag Jaw reel. It's a $69 reel, really nice reel for the money, and definitely got the job done today. So basically, between the crankbait and the jig, I was able to put 15 pounds in the boat. I actually did another challenge at the beginning of the summer on Grand, and these are the same 2 baits to put all my fish in the boat in pretty much the same order. So again, check out that video if you want to see more Catch 15 videos. And also, hopefully you guys enjoyed the lesson today in how to differentiate the different types of fish on the fish finder. It's really important to know what you're looking at on the screen if you're gonna spend 4 or 5 hours graphing like I did today, because you can waste a lot of time pulling up on schools of catfish, crappie, white bass, and other fish and not be fishing for the bass like I was here. But once you figure it out, you can put a lot of good fish in the boat really quickly, even in the toughest conditions with a lot of boat pressure and really hot weather. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and learned something. If you did, I really appreciate if you'd share it out with a friend. The videos really get a lot more traction when they're shared out with other people, and also if you have a like down below on the video, it really helps me out. Thanks again for checking out this video. We'll see you on the next one.